The Forgotten Exodus. The skies over Earth burned crimson as the Zarkol warships rained destruction from orbit. Billions of voices cried out in terror, their screams lost in the cacophony of a dying world. It was the year 2045, and humanity faced extinction at the hands of an alien race they had never even known existed. Dr. Elena Reeves stood at the command center of Sanctuary 1, Earth's last hope for survival. Her eyes, red-rimmed from sleepless nights and shed tears, scanned the monitors displaying the planet's final moments. As the lead scientist of Project Ark, she had devoted the last 5 years of her life to this moment, praying it would never come. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Captain Marcus Chen, his usually immaculate uniform now creased and stained, responded without taking his eyes off his console. "The last of the cryopods are loaded, Doctor. We're at 98% capacity." Elena nodded, a lump forming in her throat. 98%. 10,000 souls preserved. Out of billions. It wasn't enough, but it was all they could manage in the time they had. "What about the quantum fold drive?" she asked, turning to Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the brilliant physicist whose theories had made this escape possible. Yuki's fingers danced across her tablet, running last-minute diagnostics. "It's as ready as it'll ever be, Elena. But you know this is all theoretical. We've never tested it at full scale." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. "It has to work, Yuki. We have no other choice." A violent tremor shook the facility, causing alarms to blare throughout the complex. Elena stumbled, catching herself on a nearby console. "Report," she shouted over the din. "They've breached the atmosphere." Marcus yelled back, his face illuminated by the red glow of warning lights. "We're detecting landing craft. They'll be on us in minutes." Elena's mind raced. They were out of time. With a deep breath, she made the hardest decision of her life. "Initiate launch sequence. We're leaving." Marcus hesitated for a split second, his eyes meeting Elena's. In that moment, they shared the crushing guilt of abandoning billions to their fate. But they both knew the alternative meant the end of humanity altogether. The skies over Earth burned crimson as the Zarkol warships rained destruction from orbit. Billions of voices cried out in terror, their screams lost in the cacophony of a dying world. It was the year 2045, and humanity faced extinction at the hands of an alien race they had never even known existed. Dr. Elena Reeves stood at the command center of Sanctuary 1, Earth's last hope for survival. Her eyes, red-rimmed from sleepless nights and shed tears, scanned the monitors displaying the planet's final moments. As the lead scientist of Project Ark, she had devoted the last 5 years of her life to this moment, praying it would never come. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Captain Marcus Chen, his usually immaculate uniform now creased and stained, responded without taking his eyes off his console. "The last of the cryopods are loaded, Doctor. We're at 98% capacity." Elena nodded, a lump forming in her throat. 98%. 10,000 souls preserved. Out of billions. It wasn't enough, but it was all they could manage in the time they had. "What about the quantum fold drive?" she asked, turning to Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the brilliant physicist whose theories had made this escape possible. Yuki's fingers danced across her tablet, running last-minute diagnostics. "It's as ready as it'll ever be, Elena. But you know this is all theoretical. We've never tested it at full scale." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. "It has to work, Yuki. We have no other choice." A violent tremor shook the facility, causing alarms to blare throughout the complex. Elena stumbled, catching herself on a nearby console. "Report," she shouted over the din. "They've breached the atmosphere." Marcus yelled back, his face illuminated by the red glow of warning lights. "We're detecting landing craft. They'll be on us in minutes." Alina's mind raced. They were out of time. With a deep breath, she made the hardest decision of her life. Initiate launch sequence. We're leaving. Marcus hesitated for a split second, his eyes meeting Alina's. In that moment, they shared the crushing guilt of abandoning billions to their fate, but they both knew the alternative meant the end of humanity altogether. "Aye, Doctor," Marcus said softly, before his training took over. "All hands, prepare for immediate departure. This is not a drill." As the crew rushed to their stations, Alina approached the ship-wide communications panel. Her hand hovered over the button, trembling slightly. With one last look at the monitors showing her dying homeworld, she steeled herself and pressed down. "Attention all passengers," she began, her voice echoing throughout Sanctuary 1. "This is Dr. Alina Reeves. We are commencing emergency launch procedures. Please remain in your cryopods and trust in your fellow humans who will guide us to safety." She paused, fighting back tears. "I know you're scared. I know you're mourning for those we leave behind. But remember this, as long as we survive, Earth survives with us. We carry within us the hope of humanity, the dream of one day returning home. Stay strong. Stay united. We will endure." As Alina finished her address, Sanctuary 1 shuddered to life. The massive engines, powered by technology barely understood, roared in defiance of the alien invaders. Slowly, ponderously, the Ark ship began to rise. "We've got incoming," Marcus shouted. "Multiple bogies on an intercept course." Alina rushed to his side, watching in horror as dozens of Zarkul fighters streaked across the sky towards them. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Yuki, we need that quantum fold drive now." Yuki's hands flew across her controls, her face a mask of intense concentration. "The drive needs time to charge. We have to clear the atmosphere first." Sanctuary 1 shook violently as the first volley of alien weapons fire struck its shields. The Ark ship's defensive systems returned fire, filling the air with streaks of energy and explosions. Shields at 80% and dropping. One of the crew called out, "We can't take much more of this." Alina gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. "How much longer, Yuki?" 30 seconds to atmosphere's edge," Yuki replied, her voice strained. "Then another minute for the drive to reach full power." It was going to be close. Too close. Alina watched as more and more Zarkul ships appeared on the sensors, converging on their position. They were so close to escape, so close to preserving a fragment of humanity. She refused to let it end here. "Divert all non-essential power to the shields," she commanded. "We just need to hold on a little longer." The ship groaned under the assault, but inch by inch, it climbed higher. Alina felt a change in the vibrations as they broke through the last layers of Earth's atmosphere. They were in space. "Drive charging," Yuki announced. 50 seconds to full power. But the Zarkul were not about to let their prey escape. A massive battlecruiser moved to block Sanctuary 1's path, its weapons ports glowing with deadly energy. "Brace for impact," Marcus yelled. The battlecruiser fired, a lance of pure destruction racing towards the Ark ship. Alina closed her eyes, silently apologizing to all those they were leaving behind, to all those counting on them to survive. The impact never came. Alina's eyes snapped open to see a familiar ship interposing itself between Sanctuary 1 and the Zarkul weapon. The ISS Unity, Earth's first and only interstellar vessel, had arrived. "This is Admiral Kira Donovan of the Unity," a voice crackled over the comms. "Get that drive spinning, Alina. We'll buy you the time you need." Tears of gratitude streamed down Alina's face as she watched the Unity engage the Zarkul forces. "Thank you, Kira," she whispered. For the next agonizing minute, the Unity danced through space, drawing fire and dealing out destruction in equal measure. But it was a battle it could not win. As Sanctuary 1's quantum fold drive reached full power, the Unity's shields finally failed. "Drive ready," Yuki shouted. "Coordinates locked in." Elena took one last look at the monitors, watching as the Unity disappeared in a ball of fire, taking a dozen Zarkol ships with it. "Activate the drive," she said softly. "Let's make their sacrifice count." Space itself seemed to twist and bend around Sanctuary 1. There was a moment of impossible pressure, as if the entire universe was pressing in on them from all sides. Then, with a flash of light that outshone the stars, the Ark ship vanished. In the stunned silence that followed their escape, Elena allowed herself a moment of grief for Earth, for Kira and the Unity, for all they had lost. But as she looked around at her crew, at the cryopods holding the last remnants of humanity, she felt something else growing within her. Hope. They had survived. They had escaped. And someday, somehow, they would return. Humanity's story was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning. As Sanctuary 1 hurtled through the unknown reaches of space, its precious cargo slumbered, unaware of the great journey that lay ahead. And deep within the ship's core, the quantum fold drive hummed with energy, ready to carry them to a new home among the stars. The first chapter of humanity's exile had begun, but even in the darkness of space, the flame of human resilience burned bright, a beacon of defiance against the vastness of the cosmos and the enemies who had sought to extinguish it. Centuries of preparation. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before Sanctuary 1, its metallic hull gleaming faintly in the light of distant stars. Inside, the ship hummed with life, a stark contrast to the void surrounding it. It had been 500 years since the destruction of Earth, and the descendants of those first survivors were about to face their greatest challenge yet. Commander Zara Chen stood at the helm of Sanctuary 1, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. As the great-great-granddaughter of Captain Marcus Chen, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. The ship had been their home, their entire world, for generations. But soon, that would change. "Status report," Zara called out, her voice steady and clear. Chief Engineer Aidan Reeves, a direct descendant of Dr. Elena Reeves, looked up from his console. "All systems are green, Commander. The quantum fold drive is primed and ready for our return jump." Zara nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension churning in her stomach. "And the Nexus?" Dr. Lyra Tanaka, head of the Science Division, and Yuki Tanaka's hair in both blood and brilliance, stepped forward. "The Nexus is stable and fully integrated with ship systems. It's ready to receive the first wave of awakening cryo-sleepers." The Nexus was humanity's greatest achievement during their long exile. A vast, interconnected virtual reality system that allowed the ship's active crew to interface directly with Sanctuary 1's systems while simultaneously housing the minds of those still in cryosleep. It had been the key to their survival and advancement over the centuries. Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Very well. Begin awakening procedures for Batch Alpha. It's time we prepared them for what lies ahead." As her crew sprang into action, Zara couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. For 5 centuries, Sanctuary 1 had drifted through the cosmos, its inhabitants alternating between periods of cryosleep and active duty. Each generation added to the ship's knowledge and capabilities, driven by a singular purpose: to reclaim their lost home. The Nexus had been key to this preparation. While in cryosleep, the minds of Sanctuary 1's passengers were connected to this vast virtual world. Here, they could live out entire lifetimes, learning, growing, and planning for the day they would confront the Zarkol. The technology had allowed them to compress centuries of advancement into a fraction of the time. Zara's reverie was interrupted by a gentle chime from her neural implant. Dr. Tanaka's voice echoed in her mind. "Commander, Batch Alpha is ready for you in the Nexus. Shall I initiate the link?" "Proceed, Doctor," Zara replied, closing her eyes as the familiar sensation of entering the virtual world washed over her. When she opened her eyes again, Zara found herself standing in a vast auditorium. Before her, rows upon rows of seats were filled with the newly awakened members of Batch Alpha, 1,000 of Sanctuary One's best and brightest, chosen to lead the charge in humanity's return. As Zara stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the crowd. These people, despite having lived countless virtual lives, were experiencing their first moments of true consciousness since Earth's fall. The mixture of anticipation and fear on their faces was palpable. "Welcome, Batch Alpha," Zara began, her voice carrying easily through the virtual space. "For 500 years, we have carried the torch of humanity through the darkness of space. Today, that torch becomes a beacon, guiding us back to reclaim what was taken from us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "In the Nexus, you've trained for this moment. You've lived lifetimes preparing for the challenges ahead. But make no mistake, what we face now is real. The Zarkol took everything from us, but they underestimated the resilience of the human spirit." Zara's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. "We return not just with advanced technology, but with a unity of purpose that spans generations. The Nexus has allowed us to evolve beyond what the Zarkol could have ever imagined. We are no longer just the scattered remnants of a destroyed world. We are humanity reforged." As she spoke, holographic displays materialized around the auditorium, showcasing the advancements they had made. Quantum weaponry capable of bypassing even the most advanced shields, nano-swarm technology that could disassemble and reassemble matter at will, and at the center of it all, the Nexus itself, a testament to human ingenuity and the power of collective consciousness. "But our greatest weapon," Zora continued, her eyes sweeping across the audience, "is our humanity. Our capacity for empathy, for forgiveness, for hope. We go back not just to exact vengeance, but to reclaim our home and forge a future where such atrocities can never happen again." The crowd stirred, a mixture of determination and apprehension rippling through the virtual space. Zara could sense their questions, their doubts, bubbling just beneath the surface. She welcomed it. After all, it was this very human capacity for questioning, for seeking understanding, that had driven their advancement. "I know you have questions," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "And in the days to come, as we make our final preparations, we will address them all. But for now, I ask you to reflect on this. We carry within us not just the hopes of those who escaped Earth, but the legacy of every human who came before. We owe it to them, to ourselves, to face this challenge with courage, wisdom, and compassion." As Zara concluded her speech, the virtual auditorium erupted in applause. The sound swelled, filling the space with a tangible energy, the combined will of 1,000 souls ready to take on the universe. Zara allowed herself a moment to bask in the emotion before gesturing for quiet. "In the coming days, you will be fully briefed on our mission and your individual roles. But for now, take some time to acclimate to your physical bodies. Remember your training, trust in each other, and prepare yourselves for the greatest undertaking in human history." With those final words, Zara initiated the disconnection sequence. The virtual world faded away, replaced by the familiar sight of Sanctuary One's bridge. As she opened her eyes, she found her crew watching her expectantly. "Well?" Aiden asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "How did they take it?" Zara allowed herself a small smile. "They're ready, Aiden. We're all ready." As if in response to her words, a soft alarm sounded from the navigation console. Lieutenant Kai Donovan, whose ancestors had piloted the ISS Unity in its final, heroic stand, called out, "Commander, we're approaching the coordinates for the return jump. Quantum fold drive is charged and awaiting your command." Zara straightened, feeling the weight of 5 centuries of hope and determination settling on her shoulders. This was the moment they had all been preparing for, the culmination of generations of sacrifice and perseverance. "Very well," she said, her voice calm and resolute. "Initiate final jump sequence. Let's go home." As Sanctuary One's engines flared to life, preparing to bend the very fabric of space-time, Zara couldn't help but think of those first survivors who had followed a dying Earth. They had carried with them a promise to return, to reclaim, to ensure that humanity's light would never be extinguished. Now, 500 years later, their descendants were about to fulfill that promise. As the stars outside began to blur and stretch, Zara silently vowed to honor their legacy. Humanity was coming home, and the universe would never be the same again. The quantum fold drive engaged, and in a burst of light that outshone the stars themselves, Sanctuary 1 vanished from empty space, hurtling back towards the Milky Way galaxy and the future that awaited them. A new dawn. The stars shimmered in the viewport of Sanctuary 1, a familiar yet changed skyline greeting the eyes of Commander Zara Chen. Earth, once a blue jewel in the cosmos, now bore the scars of its near destruction and subsequent rebirth. But it was home, and humanity had reclaimed it. 5 years had passed since the final battle with the Zarkul Empire. 5 years of rebuilding, reconciliation, and unprecedented change. Zara stood in the newly constructed Unity Tower, the headquarters of the fledgling Galactic Concord, gazing out at the sprawling city below. "Quite a view, isn't it?" A gravelly voice spoke from behind her. Zara turned to see Ambassador Kthax, the Zarkul representative to the Concord. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the window, a sight that would have once filled her with dread. Now, it was a symbol of how far they had come. "It never gets old," Zara replied with a smile. "Sometimes I still can't believe we're really here." Kthax moved to stand beside her, his compound eyes reflecting the cityscape. "Your people have achieved something truly remarkable, Commander. In just 5 years, you've not only reclaimed your world, but reshaped the very fabric of galactic society." Zara nodded, thinking back to the tumultuous events that had led to this moment. The return of Sanctuary 1 had indeed caught the Zarkul Empire off guard. Humanity's advanced technology, honed over centuries in exile, had quickly turned the tide of battle. But it was what came after that truly changed everything. In the heat of victory, with the Zarkul fleet in ruins and their homeworld at humanity's mercy, Zara had made a decision that would alter the course of history. Instead of retribution, she had offered peace. "We could have destroyed you," Zara said softly, more to herself than to Kthax. "After everything your people did to Earth, to humanity. Many thought we should have." Kthax's antennae twitched, a gesture Zara had come to recognize as one of deep emotion. "And yet you didn't. You showed mercy where we had shown none. You offered understanding where we had offered only destruction. It changed us." The decision hadn't been an easy one. Many among the human forces had called for the complete annihilation of the Zarkul, seeing it as just revenge for Earth's near destruction. But Zara, remembering the lessons learned in the Nexus and the wisdom passed down through generations, had seen another path. "We had spent centuries preparing for war," Zara explained, turning to face Kthax fully. "But in doing so, we had also evolved. The Nexus taught us the value of shared experiences, of seeing the world through others' eyes. We realized that continuing the cycle of violence would only lead to more suffering. And so, in a move that had shocked both sides, Zara had initiated first contact protocols. Using the Nexus technology, they had connected with the Zarkul collective consciousness, allowing both species to experience each other's history, culture, and perspectives. The effect had been profound. The Zarkul, confronted with the full weight of their actions and experiencing human emotions firsthand, had been shaken to their core. What followed was an unprecedented period of reflection, remorse, and eventually, reconciliation. "Your Nexus technology," Kthax said, a note of wonder in his voice. "It changed everything. To be able to truly understand another species, to feel what they feel. It opened our eyes to the gravity of our past actions and the possibility of a different future." Zara nodded, remembering the tense early days of the peace process. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of anger, a lot of pain on both sides. But we had learned the hard way that clinging to hatred only leads to more destruction. We had to find a better way. And find a better way they had. The Galactic Concord, born from those first tentative steps towards peace, had grown to encompass not just humans and Zarkol, but dozens of other species from across the galaxy. The Nexus technology, freely shared, had become the foundation for a new era of interstellar cooperation and understanding. Earth, once a burned and battered world, had been reborn. Zarkol terraforming technology, combined with human ingenuity, had healed the scars left by their ancient weapons. The planet now teemed with life once more, its restored ecosystems a testament to what could be achieved when former enemies worked together. The Galactic Council meets in an hour, Kithax reminded her gently. The vote on expanding Nexus access to the Outer Rim worlds is today. Zara straightened, smoothing out her uniform. Of course, let's not keep them waiting. As they walked together towards the council chambers, Zara couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The path hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead. Not everyone had embraced the new era of peace, and there were always those who sought to disrupt the delicate balance they had achieved. But as she entered the Grand Council chamber, seeing representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in harmony, Zara felt a surge of hope. This was what those first survivors on Sanctuary 1 had dreamed of, not just reclaiming Earth, but forging a better future for all. Taking her seat at the head of the table, Zora called the council to order. As the session began, she caught sight of a familiar face in the observation gallery, Aidan Reeves, now director of the Nexus Institute. He gave her a small nod, a gesture that spoke volumes of their shared history and the legacy they carried. Representatives of the Galactic Concord, Zora began, her voice clear and strong. We gather today to continue the work of building a more united and understanding galaxy. Our ancestors, both human and Zarkol, could never have imagined this moment. But through courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to peace, we have turned ancient enemies into steadfast allies. As she spoke, Zara felt the weight of history on her shoulders. The sacrifices of those who had fled Earth, the generations who had kept hope alive aboard Sanctuary 1, and all those who had fought and died in the name of reclamation. But she also felt the likeness of possibility, the potential of a future brighter than any they could have imagined. Today, we take another step forward, she continued. In expanding the Nexus, we expand our capacity for empathy, for understanding, for seeing the universe through each other's eyes. We move closer to a galaxy where conflict is resolved not through force, but through mutual comprehension and respect. The chamber filled with a chorus of agreement, representatives from 100 worlds united in purpose. As the session progressed, Zora allowed herself a moment of reflection. They had come so far, from a species on the brink of extinction to the architects of a new galactic order. Yet she knew this was just the beginning. There were still stars to explore, challenges to overcome, and endless possibilities to discover. But now, they would face the future not alone, but together. A united galaxy, born from the ashes of conflict and forged in the fires of understanding. As the vote was called, and the motion passed unanimously, Zara felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with Earth's destruction had led them here, to a future brighter than any could have imagined. Humanity had not just survived. It had thrived, and in doing so, had lifted entire civilizations with it. The session concluded, and as the representatives filed out, many stopping to exchange words with her, Zora's gaze was drawn once more to the window. The sun was setting over the restored Earth, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. In that moment, she could almost hear the voices of those long-ago ancestors, Alina Reeves, Marcus Chen, Yuki Tanaka, and all the others who had set them on this path. "We did it," she whispered to them. "We came home. And we made it better than we ever dreamed." As night fell on Earth, the stars emerged, no longer distant and cold, but beacons of possibility. Humanity had reclaimed its place among them, not as conquerors, but as peacemakers. The future stretched out before them, infinite and full of promise. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, Sanctuary 1 continued its journey, no longer an arc of survival, but a symbol of hope, carrying the story of humanity's resilience to distant worlds yet unknown. The great adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning.